I call the meeting to order. Welcome to the fifth meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted on the 18th of September 2025, the committee is meeting to carry out its study on suicide prevention among veterans.
Is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. And before we continue, I would ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including nos chers interprètes.
Our dear interpreters, and thank you very much.
You'll notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. Pour garantir le bon déroulement de la réunion.
To ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, I will provide witnesses and members with the following instructions. First, before speaking, wait until I call on you by name. If you're participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you may choose between French, English, and floor at the bottom of your screen. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. I would remind you that all comments from members and witnesses should be addressed to the chair. For members present in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function. The clerk of the committee and I will do our level-headed best to maintain the speaking order, and we thank you for your patience and understanding in this regard.
Welcome our witnesses. We have four organizations today, and thanks to all of you. Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families, Fardius Ossini, President and Chief Executive Officer, Gabrielle Dupuis, Director, Research Partnerships and Government Affairs, the Veterans Association Food Bank, Mary Blackburn, our Executive Director, from Veterans Transition Network, Oliver Thorne, Chief Executive Officer, who is joining us by video conference, and from Wounded Warriors Canada, retired Captain Philip Ralph, Director, Clinical Services, and I'll say, sir, thank you for your service to our country. Nous allons commencer avec les déclarations.
We will begin with witness statements to be followed by a question and answer period with members of the committee.
Mr. Ossini et Madame Dupuis, vous pouvez commencer avec votre...
You may begin with your opening statements. You have 5 minutes, after which each witness will be asked to answer questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Fardius Ossini, and I serve as the President and CEO of the Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families. It is a privilege to join you today to speak about suicide, a subject with very real and immediate consequences for veterans, families, and communities across Canada. Atlas is a federally funded intermediary working at arm's length from Veterans Affairs Canada to strengthen mental health supports for veterans and their families. We collaborate with veterans, families, researchers, and service providers to co-develop practical, evidence-informed resources, and we also lead and fund research to build national capacity by supporting new knowledge, skills, and networks so organizations across Canada are better equipped to serve veterans and families. Suicide among veterans is a serious and persistent challenge. Male veterans are about 1.4 times more likely to die by suicide compared to civilian men, and female veterans about twice as likely as civilian women. For men, the highest risk is often in the first 4 years after release, while for women, risk peaks much later, often around 20 years post-service. While veteran-specific data remains limited, CAF reported that in 2023 there were 17 suicide deaths among regular force members and 4 among reservists. The suicide rate in the regular force that year was about 27 per 1,000 person years, higher than in 2022. These figures show suicide prevention requires long horizon planning and sustained support across the veteran life course. I'll now pass it along to my colleague, Gabby Dupuy, Director of Research Partnership and Government Affairs.
Thank you, Firdaus. I'll briefly speak to some of the work that's been done within Atlas. So in our most recent release related to suicide prevention, Atlas worked alongside veterans, family members, and the Center for Suicide Prevention to co-design a suite of resources. The Veteran Toolkit offers guidance on recognizing warning signs, building protective factors, and finding care, while the corresponding Family Toolkit helps loved ones support veterans while also caring for themselves with advice on burnout, self-care, and safety planning. We've also developed conversation guides and wallet cards to help start suicide-related discussions in clinics, peer support groups, or even within your home. These were released in September of 2024, and since then, these resources have been downloaded about 10,000 times in both English and in French. And we have further distributed printed copies to CAF transition centers, the Military Family Resource Center, OOSI clinics, VAC offices, and legions across Canada. Additionally, recognizing the importance of safe communication, we've co-produced media guidelines with McGill University veterans and journalists to help organizations and media outlets report on suicide responsibly and safely to reduce stigma, but also reduce the risk of contagion. We've also created fact sheets showing how families are affected by suicidality and the critical role that they can play in prevention. In parallel, Atlas is collaborating with Queen's University on research into military and veteran family suicidality. This work recognizes that family members may face heightened risk of distress and mental health challenges, often compounded by limited access to dedicated supports and services. It underscores the need to better identify and address the unique mental health needs of families as part of the broader continuum of care for the veteran community. But our work extends beyond suicide-specific resources. Experiences such as military sexual trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, or traumatic brain injuries are all connected to suicide risk. The resources Atlas has developed in these areas are part of the broader fabric of suicide prevention because they help to address the underlying injuries or traumas that can contribute to despair and isolation. Suicide prevention requires not just tools, but also sustained collaboration and system-level thinking. Atlas will be hosting a national roundtable on the intersection between suicide prevention and substance use, recognizing that these risks are often intertwined. Within the veteran community, there is sometimes a culture of turning to alcohol or other substances, perhaps to numb psychological pain, which can mask distress and increase vulnerability. This roundtable will be supported by a rapid evidence profile to ensure that the discussions are grounded in the latest research and practice insights. I'll now pass it back to Firdaus, who will be offering some insights into some international work and to offer a closing statement.
Thank you, Gabby. I'll be very quick, Madam Chair. Internationally, I want to highlight two streams of work. The Australian Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide offers a strong model of systemic inquiry. It collected thousands of submissions, including from Atlas, heard directly from veterans and families, and issued more than 100 recommendations. Its findings emphasize accountability and oversight, longitudinal care, the centrality of lived experience, and the need for robust data systems. Separately, Atlas also contributes and learns from the Five Eyes nations. We are part of the Five Eyes Mental Health Research Innovation Collaboration, and a recent commentary, Suicide in Military and Veteran Population, A View Across the Five Eyes Nations, reviewed suicide trends, risk and protective factors, and challenges in prevention. It underscores that despite decades of study, we still struggle to predict and prevent suicide with precision, especially the transition from ideation to attempts. Canada can benefit from these insights, particularly the emphasis on longitudinal research, better data integration, and cross-jurisdiction learning as we refine our own suicide prevention strategies. The statistics we've shared today underscore the urgency of this work. Even one suicide is too many. Atlas and our partners have demonstrated that practical evidence-informed tools already exist, and with your support, we can expand their research reach, integrate families more fully, and strengthen prevention across the veteran life course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would invite Mrs. Blackburn for 5 minutes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me here today. It is an honor. It's unfortunate that we still need to talk about this topic, but it is real and it needs to be addressed. Is there any magical solution to prevent suicide? No, there is not. It is alarming how many veterans talk about, attempt, or die from suicide. As Ferdos mentioned, the suicide rates are higher amongst our male population between the ages of 18 and up. It's the highest suicide amongst all groups. Female veterans are 2 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population. I kind of researched how many veterans died of suicide last year, and it seems hard to get an accurate number. Some contributing factors are mental health issues, substance abuse, which can be significant to contemplating or committing suicide. As I have said, there's no perfect solution to this tragedy, but I'm certainly not an expert. But we do have some programs that may help. At the Veterans Association, we strive to ensure veterans are safe and provide services that help them understand there is a better way. I can only share with you some of our experiences through our programs. I think the most important component of our program is the peer-to-peer support. As I've stated many times, veterans have a unique understanding of one another and have a bond that we will never fully understand. Our goal and mission when we started was to try to prevent homelessness, hunger, isolation, and ultimate veteran suicide. We try to keep it simple. Our first goal is to provide hope. When you feel you cannot get through another day because you can't pay your bills, put gas in your car, need extra money for your kids, or pet food for your dog, all the simple things we go through in life, we just provide the necessities. It wouldn't matter if you're a veteran or not, but not being able to provide for your family or yourself is devastating and can lead to thoughts of giving up. Having a physical location where they can come in, have a coffee, and talk about whatever they want, knowing that other veterans will understand what they've been going through, makes a world of difference. On many occasions, veterans have told us it was so good to have somebody that understands exactly what they were feeling. Our facilities are alcohol and drug-free, and we have designed the Veterans Association so all veterans feel they have ownership. When you have ownership in something, you tend to nurture it, respect it, and ensure you leave a legacy for all veterans from the past and for the future. We all know that veterans need a purpose. During their time in service, they always had a purpose. At the Veterans Association, we do encourage veterans to volunteer, attend community events, or simply be there and be supportive for their fellow veterans. Every veteran that comes in, we do a full intake. One very important thing to do is make sure they fill out their Veterans Affairs paperwork. Numerous times we've been very successful to find benefits for veterans. This certainly helps with their financial situation, and their overall mental health improves dramatically. This may sound a little strange, but many have said it feels, but it does give them the sense that their service was important. Our outreach team is made up of veterans themselves. The communication between veterans is instrumental in discovering if that veteran is at risk. When they determine a veteran is struggling, we provide home visits, counseling, and an opportunity to volunteer. Removing them from those 4 walls they stare at constantly helps them take away those dark thoughts. Many veterans have come in just to volunteer, have a coffee, or go to our Thursday dinners. They feel like they have a purpose again. Working with Veterans Affairs offices and caseworkers, we're starting to build a better relationship for veterans who've been struggling with their workers. At times, it means replacing a veterans worker for someone else. Then that's what we will do. Many veterans have told us that the disconnect between Veterans Affairs and a lack of understanding has been very difficult to deal with. This is not to say that every veteran experiences this, but for those that do, we ensure we find someone who they can communicate with and understand. There are many programs. Built for veterans struggling with mental health or addiction, and many are instrumental in getting the veterans the best help. We have resources that we can address, but more complex issues they are going through. We can provide provincial or financial assistance to any cost because this will alleviate their financial burden. Our emergency program has always assisted the homeless population. Many people think the homeless veterans are addicts or adults, but the truth is many are homeless because of unemployment, divorce, sale of property, or mental health issues. I'm happy to report in the month of September we were able to restructure the lives of 6 veterans. Of those 6 veterans, they indicated they may not be here today had the program not supported them. All 6 now are housed and thriving. Do I still have time?
Yeah.
Okay. Veteran suicide is very complex, but the Veterans Association we believe that if you address all the issues a veteran may be experiencing, they have a better chance of giving them hope. I cannot tell you how many times a veteran has said to me, "I don't know where I would be without you. Perhaps I'd be homeless or possibly dead." We provide a service of hope. I remember my board asked me one time to write a small manual on how to deal with veteran suicide. The truth is you can't. Each veteran's experience is something different. For example, I had a veteran who posted on Facebook that he was going to end his life that day. The immediate reaction from a fellow employee was to call the RCMP. Knowing his history with authority, it had always been very toxic. Knowing this gentleman myself, I called him and told him to get out of the house immediately because the RCMP were on their way. Had they shown up, it most certainly would have been suicide by police. The lesson that we learned from this is that every veteran with any kind of mental issue is now red flagged in our system. Before one single person makes a decision on how to handle a volatile situation, it is discussed with no fewer than 2 people. In closing, I think the most important thing to do is listen. Even if you feel like you're too busy, you're too tired, if someone's looking for a way, put everything aside and just listen. Do your best to reach out to other resources and follow the amazing work they do. Working together may not save every life, but it can certainly save one. That's all I have to say. Oh, it's hot in here.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Blackburn. Captain Ralph, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. The ongoing discussion that we're having today is critical and long overdue. To say that I'm honored and humbled to be asked to comment is an understatement. Yet as important as this discussion is, I cannot help but confess a sense of inadequacy as we approach this topic together. I've struggled to frame this discussion in a manner worthy of the topic's gravity. This is a difficult discussion, which is further complicated by the fact that all of us as human beings struggle, even in the broadest terms, to come to grips with our own mortality. We have all seen what happens when we throw an object into a body of water. As the ripple effect radiates from the epicenter, the point of contact, and continues towards the shore, so it is with suicide. Powerful and profound are its effects on family, friends, and larger society. My remarks today are informed by over 4 decades of pastoral ministry, 26 years as an Army chaplain, and nearly 2 decades of experience in various roles within Wounded Warriors Canada. Suicide historically in our society and in many others has been a proverbial elephant in the room. The families I've dealt with over my career have informed and shaped my remarks, and they have profoundly, in fact, impacted my life. As essential and as important as this topic is, we must admit that it is one that as individuals and as society, we still struggle to address because of the flood of colliding emotions, including loss, grief, guilt, shame, all coupled with trauma. The complicated and conflicting emotions and issues surrounding suicide were for the longest time only spoken of in society, if at all, in hushed tones. I want to state unequivocally that the very fact that today's committee is addressing this issue is a positive and hopeful sign. Early in my career as a pastor of a small congregation in Toronto, I remember feeling ill-equipped to deal with a number of families affected by suicide in my community. In my career as a Canadian Armed Forces chaplain, I was often asked and tasked with the sacred responsibility of going to the door to inform loved ones that it was the worst day of their lives. Notifications ranged in my career from those who were killed in action to those who died by suicide. Towards the end of my career, I noticed a sharp increase and change in the number of notifications that were related to suicide. I know that is true for many of my fellow chaplains as well. This fact was key in the early decision of Wounded Warriors Canada to focus solely on mental health. Today, Wounded Warriors Canada is a national leading mental health service provider dedicated to serving trauma-exposed professionals. Trauma-exposed professionals and their families. Wounded Warriors Canada specializes in providing culturally informed services that utilize a combination of education, counseling, and training approaches to support resiliency and recovery from post-trauma injuries. Personally, I vividly recall my personal guilt and confusion at the loss of a serving member by suicide only a couple days after I talked to that individual member. It haunted me for a long time. I was angered when senior members of the chain of command, as late as 2003, denied the rise of suicide rates among Canadian Forces members. We are indebted to the work of those who've gone before us. I think of an episode in an article in the Globe and Mail by Renetta Desario called The Unremembered, which brought all these things to light. A review of 9 police suicides in Ontario in 2018 said the realities of police mental health ecosystem had to change. The same needs to be said about veterans and serving members of the Canadian Forces. Strides have been made, like the naming of the 2004 National Memorial Silver Cross Medal, Maureen Anderson. We all know that much more needs to be done. And this committee, the Department, and the Government of Canada needs to focus its efforts. This includes policy, programs, and most importantly, proactive prevention. Items that this committee must consider, I would suggest, include the impact of Stoic culture on the mental health of members, the need for safety and a whole-of-person approach to consider physical, emotional, cognitive, relational, and spiritual elements of those experiencing trauma so that they can feel and say, I am safe and I feel safe. The role of organizations and leadership when it comes to mental health. Because when it comes to mental health, leadership is every bit as much of the issue as the individuals themselves. The immediate implementation and funding of available evidence-informed resiliency program that's available right now. The example has been set by the Government of Ontario in the area of public safety with the funding of Warrior Health this past spring. A 24/7 access to mental health resources for trauma and operational stress specifically designed for trauma-exposed professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't deal with trauma, nothing else matters. If you don't deal with trauma, nothing else matters. I'd love to talk to you about how Warrior Health works, maybe in your questions. I want to thank the committee for its attention. This government has rightly highlighted the need to adequately fund and equip the forces. I would submit that a failure to invest in mental health readiness of serving members and veterans will constitute a mission failure on the part of the government if it's not done. I look forward to sharing with the members resources that are deployable now and will make a significant positive impact for both serving members and for veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Ralph. I've been, as you can see, a member. I hope you're okay. We've been a little bit more open to a little bit extra time. I still will reiterate 5 minutes. And now, Mr. Thorne, it is your time.
Thank you very much. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Oliver Thorne. I'm the CEO of the Veterans Transition Network, a charity that provides free group counseling and transition programs for members and veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP across Canada. Au réseau de transition de vétérans, nous travaillons.
At the Veterans Transition Network, we worked with a high number of veterans who are at high risk for suicide. Our aim is to provide them with human links and hope and services to prevent such a tragic outcome. Evaluations of our programming show that over 2/3 of those who participate in our network have had suicidal thoughts over the last year. The same evaluation has also shown a significant and ongoing reduction of suicide ideation among veterans who have completed our programming.
They will focus on the risk factors, potential solutions, and the current shortfalls of the government effort to prevent veteran suicide. I bring the perspective of an organization that has worked closely on this problem for over a decade. Although suicide is extremely difficult to predict at an individual level, research from the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs identifies several risk factors that are consistently associated with veteran suicide. Service in the junior ranks, in the Army, and combat roles place veterans at elevated risk, which peaks for many within the 4 years after they leave the service. A difficult transition to civilian life, mental health injuries, a loss of identity and purpose, social isolation, and disconnection are all associated with increased risk of suicide in Canadian veterans. D'après notre expérience at RTV,
our experience at the network shows that the risks are complex. A psychological wound increases the possibility of having a medical condition, and this is linked to an identity crisis and to a sense of purpose crisis, which increases the mental stress and complicates the transition to civilian life or maintenance of civilian life. When all this disconnection turns into despair, the suicide risk is elevated.
And the Canadian Armed Forces have taken steps to reduce suicide risk by improving transition education, access to one-on-one counseling, and investing in peer programming. But we don't yet know if those efforts are working. The Veteran Suicide Mortality Study, published in 2021, found no significant change in suicide rates between 1975 and 2016, the last year where available data was published. More concerning, data shows that veterans who left the Canadian Armed Forces between 2015 and 18 reported higher rates of medical release, mental health injuries, and transition difficulty than those who left in the previous 15 years. So we may be entering a period of increased risk for veteran suicide in Canada. If the risks are suicide, injury, isolation, and hopelessness, then the solutions are treatment, social connection, and renewed purpose. Group-based counseling can provide all three. It can provide culturally competent, specialized clinical care for mental health injuries delivered in a format that is experiential and socially connected. In a group, veterans don't just receive help, they help one another, rebuilding community and rediscovering the self-worth they had in the military, the very factors that present against suicide. At VTN, we see this every day in our programs across Canada. Cependant, l'approbation des anciens.
However, VAC's approval allowing veterans to participate in specialized work such as ours is often buried in a complex bureaucratic set of procedures, and the approval has become more and more complex to obtain.
We have seen the funding approval rate for Veterans Affairs clients who attend our programs fall by over 60%. We are routinely denied funding for eligible clients, with Veterans Affairs case managers citing unfamiliar, complex, and time-consuming approval processes as the reason for the denial. At VTM, we know the risk is suicide. so we don't turn those veterans away or delay their participation until funding is approved. Instead, we use the funding we raise from donors to ensure that the veterans can receive help when and where they ask for it. But that financial constraint reduces the number of people we can help every year. We know who is at risk, and we know that this risk is urgent. My major recommendation for the committee today is to work towards creating greater access for veterans to attend specialized group-based transition programs and trauma programs by implementing an automatic approval for veterans who are medically released from service due to a mental health injury. By doing so, we can get the veterans who are the most at risk quickly into the care and the community they need before the dominoes of suicide begin to fall. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torn. We will now start with the round of questions. We'll start with 6 minutes, and I'll invite Mr. Richards first.
Thank you, and thank you to all of you for your very helpful remarks today. And I want to start with you, Murray, if I can. And you were before this committee on a previous study in the previous Parliament, and you told a story that I think would be very appropriate if you recall the story I'm talking about the veteran that you discovered in the parking lot. I would like for you to just kind of briefly tell that story to this committee so that we can have it included in the evidence of this study, and I do have some questions that relate to it. So if I could let you just start by telling that story, and then I'll ask you some questions about it.
Okay, so it was a really, 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 really hot summer day, and the air conditioning had broke down in the building too. So all I wanted to do was go home and sit in my little mister and have a drink. But I'd seen this car all day long, come in, going. I couldn't figure out really what he wanted. But when I left, he came up and he asked me if he could talk to me. I said, "You absolutely can." So back into the hot building we went, and he just broke down saying that he was losing everything, his wife, his kids, his home, everything that he could possibly lose, and he was at the very end of his rope. So I asked him what would help the most, and we ended up paying all his bills, getting him a hamper, so by the end of the conversation, he was pretty stabilized and doing well. So off I went home, he went home, and about, I don't know if it was 6 months thereabouts, I met him at a Navy pipe band ceremony, and he came up and asked if I had remembered him, and I said I did. And he thanked me at that time, almost broke down with saying thank you for everything I had done for him. And he said, seriously, if you hadn't have done that, he said, that would have been the last day of my life. He said, I was waiting for you to leave. If you had left, he said, I would have pulled into your parking stall and I would have blown my brains out. He said, I had a loaded handgun under the seat of my car. And so just knowing that people are resorting to that level because there's no resources available is heartbreaking. So that's why we spend so much time just addressing even the little issues, not having food on your table or whatever the case may be. But we get a few stories like that.
Right, and I first of all, thank you. I know how that's not easy to share, I'm sure.
It's okay.
That you pointed out that it's not isolated. It's not the only story that you've had like that. And what I wanted why I wanted you to tell us that story is obviously I wanted to see it included in the report, but I also because I think it drives to up the point that you were just making, that you provide more than just food and clothing and help like that. You're providing all kinds of help to veterans. And what I wanted to ask you about in relation to that is, when veterans are struggling with those basics, right? Shelter, food, their finances, does that make it more or less likely that they are able to get help, with suicidal thoughts they might have, or other mental health challenges or addictions or things like that? Do you think it's less possible or for someone to actually get the help with those things when those basics aren't taken care of?
I just, from our experience at the food bank, when you lose all hope that you're going to lose everything, and part of that story that I forgot to tell you about too was that he had struggled with Veterans Affairs for a long time, trying to get his benefits, and they just weren't coming through. So by coming to the food bank, when you can pay somebody's rent and know that they're not going to be facing homelessness, or, like I said, put food on their table for their children or feed their dog or whatever. I don't know, there's no scientific study on it or anything, whether that truly prevented them from committing suicide. Some will just commit suicide. We've had a couple that we worked with for a long time, and they still end up committing suicide. But overall, through our program, we know that has stopped a lot of people from thinking this is the end. So I think that's important to say.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about the challenges you face in being able to continue to do the good work that you do for veterans. I know you told us previously that cost of living is a challenge that has made it more difficult for you to continue to do your work. Does that remain a challenge, and what impact does that have on a veteran when they're in these kinds of situations? And secondly, what other challenges do you face? What are some of the bigger challenges you face in order to continue to do the work that you do and serve all the veterans that you wish to be able to serve?
Well, our busy time of year right now, our busiest time of year is October, November, December. That's where we get a majority of our funding. So it's going to be a little bit squeaky this year because there's a strike with the teachers, and we get a good portion of our food from schools. And then we have the postal strike on top of that, which a lot of our elderly folks would rather send a check. That's the only way they know how to make a donation. So that's going to be a struggle. We've always done fairly well just as our own little company with our own emergency funding programs. And then along came the Veterans Homeless Program. They have designated $1 million a year for us to now work in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and BC. But $1 million doesn't go very far when you're trying to help people. We get constant referrals from Veterans Affairs, at least 3 to 5 a week, asking if we can help with the veteran, but we get $0 from Veterans Affairs to fund any of our programs, which kind of seems a little bit strange to me. But I think the biggest challenge is just always maintaining that we're going to have that money to help those veterans.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
Sorry about that. I was listening actively and forgot the time. So,
I would like to invite Mr. Clark for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to direct my questions to you, Captain Ralph. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for your service as a chaplain and the work that you talked about in your opening statement, which I think is exemplary, of course. And you touched on a couple things that piqued my interest. One was the need to deal with stoic culture, as you phrased it. So obviously you've been exposed to veterans into the military for decades. So first of all, can you explain what you mean when you say stoic culture? And also the second piece of that is, over your career in the military and working with veterans, have you seen change in that? Yes or no? Or what have the trends looked like in your view?
Well, first of all, there's a positive element to stoic culture, which is, the military is, like all uniformed service, is tasked to get stuff done. When things are going sideways, we're those strange people, as you know, that run towards danger when all the smart people run away from it, right? And so I like this, when I talk to people that haven't been in uniform, I like to put it very simply to them, that you have to realize that those who've served in uniform think differently. That's not better, that's not worse, it's just different. And so if you're going to meet their needs, then you have to be able to talk their language and speak to them in a manner that resonates with them. We've had veterans talk, phone me and say, can you find me a clinician? I went and found one. I thought I needed help. I put my hand up. I went there and I went into so-and-so's office, and they can't spell veteran, or they can't spell first responder, right? And that's because we come from a culture that we're trained that when something happens, there is an SOP for it. you do this, then you do that, then you do this. They want a plan. They want to see that there's something there that makes sense, that there's a goal. And when it gets all lofty and fussy, they go, this civvy doesn't understand me. And it's one of the reasons that Wounded Warriors Canada, so we have great partnerships with other organizations like Homewood, like Trillium Health Network. And if they are going to see a veteran, every member of Homewood staff has to take the Introduction to Trauma-Exposed Professionals course that Wounded Warriors Canada offers online. I suggest that if the members of the committee email me their contact number, I'll enroll you in the course for free, because you need to take that just to understand that it's 5 hours, it's asynchronous, it's online, and it's taught by our National Clinical Director, Dr. Tim Black. So that's important. I know we have that same relationship with that program with Atlas, because we're collaborating together. So Stoic culture, but the problem with Stoic culture, of course, is when you bring that out of that doing your job atmosphere and you bring it into your home and you bring it into the wider society, people, A, don't understand it, and B, it doesn't really work that well in other situations. So we need to understand where they're coming from and treat them in a manner that and to know, the other thing is, of course, I did reemphasize the line twice that if you don't deal with trauma, nothing else matters. I did that on purpose. It's not because I forgot I said it. It's because that is the truth, that if you don't deal with trauma, nothing else does matter.
Thank you, and I don't want to speak for members of the committee in general, but I assume we would all be interested in taking you up on your offer that you mentioned there, first and foremost. You also touched on, well, with Wounded Warriors Canada, obviously there's a lot of different programs. You mentioned the trauma-informed experiences. There's programs for spouses, programs for kids of veterans, which is fantastic. And in your opening statement, you also talked about Warrior Health as a model that exists. It sounded like only in Ontario when I was looking through the website. I took note of that as well. It started in the spring, I believe you said. Could you just give us an overview of that program and what it looks like and how you, I assume, think it can help?
Yeah, so the public safety side of the House Uniform Service has many of the same struggles that military uniform people do. And so WSIB was not getting any traction. People weren't returning to work. They were going off of mental health injuries. Premiums were going up. Nothing was happening. People were frustrated with WSIB. They said exactly the same things about WSIB that veterans say about Veterans Affairs Canada. And we said to them, it's because you're not speaking their language. So we began to, with a number of programs and inputs, we've started with the First Responder Specialty Program, which is another program. But finally we said, what we need to get is a resource in the hands of every single first responder and family member in the province of Ontario that is trauma-informed, that is culturally appropriate, that is anonymous. Nobody in their chain of command knows about it. And that's Warrior Health. You can go on your phones right now on your app, and you can download Warrior Health. And you see the resources there. And what's wonderful about it's been accessed since its launch 200,000 times. That app has been accessed 200,000 times. The only information we get back at Wounded Warriors Canada is how many times it's been, and it's with our partners. And collaboration is important. We have a great partnership with Atlas. That program is a partnership with Homewood, with Trillium Health, with CAMAGE, and with Boots on the Ground, leading places. So that's a solution, and it can be implemented today.
I'm very sorry to do this, sir. I do have to give equal time to all our member of parliament. So, Madame Gaudreau, pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Gaudreau, 6 minutes. Madam Chair, we should keep our witnesses late into the evening. I think we need to speak to the essentials. From what I understand, on one hand, I fully agree with my colleague, Member Clark, MP Clark, to the effect that this training should be carried out by all of us. And I would like to go even further than that, and I would be very happy to hear, Captain Ralph, whether you agree with me. Anyone who is called on to carry out programming, enter into contact with the veteran, either at the departmental level or an elected official, an elected representative, a minister, or basically anyone. I would like to know whether, and first and foremost, really, how we can make real changes, effective changes, if, people in general don't understand or don't give full value to, not necessarily because they don't want to. So I don't know whether this can be relevant, that we put in the report that everyone has to have gone through this, premise to understand. Anyone, like people working for the civil service and all of us. What do you think?
Simple answer. Absolutely. There you go. Is that short enough?
Est-ce que c'est unanime? Est-ce que c'est unanime?
And is this what you all feel?
I would completely agree. I think, as Captain Ralph was sharing earlier, when it comes to cultural competency, service providers, not many have them. So veterans, when they go to get care, that's a courageous step that they're taking. They're finally putting their hand up and saying, I actually need help. But when you get a service provider that doesn't understand your realities, doesn't understand your world or your culture, you're never going to come back. And if that's your first experience, unfortunately, then that means you're not getting the care you deserve. So we have to ensure that healthcare providers who are working with veterans and their families have that cultural competency. And I agree, I think everyone should get it, and starting with case managers. We hear from veterans all the time that if you get a great case manager who understands your world, then you're going to get the care you want and you need. But that's a lottery sometimes, because unfortunately you might not get an individual who has the training. So yes, Atlas is working on developing a cultural competency training that's building off of that trauma-exposed professional training that we did in collaboration with Wounded Warriors. But this is one that Australia had developed. It's shown to be quite promising, and we're now adapting it to the Canadian culture because although there's overlap, there are some very distinct differences here in Canada. So that's a training we want to offer completely free to the community, to service providers. And I think ultimately, if you're getting good care, then that's going to help with suicide prevention. Yeah.
Ben moi, en fait, Madame la Présidente, je pense que ça commence par...
Well, Madam Chair, I think this would be the groundwork. You can have goodwill, and you probably feel that we are very empathic, we're in listening mode, and we're very attentive. But we'll head out of here, and that'll all be behind us. We've got budgets to deal with. We have a lot of constraints to manage, yet we are willing to help. So we are now studying C11 to change the criminal code, and I will mention right up that that's great, but what about the services? What about respect? Because we can very well say, yes, there are mental health problems everywhere, there are homeless people in the streets, and, so many things are awry. But that said, the service rendered by people who have contributed is, to my mind, a lack of respect. And when I look at other jurisdictions, other countries, where people are told we're proud of you, and pride is, an essential factor. And not only do two-thirds of people who attempt suicide, quite the contrary. I'm thinking of Mr. Thorne here. There is a community, and the community will be very tight, and there will be sums, and there will be less vulnerability, because we don't feel we're heard. So I speak from the heart. I don't really even have a question for you. I say, wake up. We know what we need to do. So I invite you to ask everyone who has received services, because you've given some. I've got, you've got 6 people who you feel survived thanks to you, and so on and so forth. But you have to help us to help you. And I'm thinking of the minister's point of view. And probably if we have this very in-depth description, then if there's a decision to the effect that 5% more will be spent on defense, then all of us here will say that's fine, but what are we doing in prevention and what are we doing with the people? I mean, they're still alive. Afghanistan. Let's just look at Afghanistan and them. So I would just like to hear what you have to say about my sudden awakening here, which I think is very deep. But what I think of true concern is that we might leave here without really getting anywhere. Ms. Gaudreau, I'm really sorry. This will have to go to the next round. I'm sorry, witnesses. We may need to keep this thought in mind for the next time that Ms. Gaudreau has time. We will now turn to Mr. Richards, 5 minutes.
Sure. Thanks again, Chair. Let me start with you, Captain Ralph. Seems to me, if you have a different opinion, please feel free to share it, that right now VAC does a fairly decent job in terms of the initial contact when they encounter a veteran in crisis. Like there's, frontline staff have the training and they're able to recognize and generally de-escalate someone that's in the immediate circumstances is suicidal. But I think where there seems to be a gap or where there's a lapse is kind of past that stage when the veteran kind of needs that prolonged care. You mentioned, of course, your program. But can you just briefly talk to the importance of that follow-up when it comes to dealing with a veteran that's struggling with trauma or with suicidality and what needs to exist beyond that initial contact and initial de-escalation?
Well, if we're talking about treatment, then we call them our downstream programs, similar to what Oliver Thorne talked about, group-based operational stress intervention programs. It's a sad state that these programs that are essential to veterans' recoveries are funded largely off bake sales and bike rides and other community-based fundraising. Wounded Warriors Canada has a wonderful support throughout Canada. And as the Director of Clinical Services, I get to spend almost $6 million every year on these services. But I'm going to tell you, we have a huge waiting list. And these programs, although they're not cheap, they're affordable when you look at the alternatives, when you look at long-term inpatient facilities, et cetera, because they deal specifically with trauma. And, and the earlier that someone gets care, it's no different than physical injuries. The earlier you get care, the better the outcomes are. It's pretty simple. And so we need to be proactive in the preventative stuff, like Warrior Health, like introduction to trauma-exposed professionals. We now give every member of Global Affairs that goes on a foreign mission now takes trauma resiliency training provided by Wounded Warriors Canada, because they were going into horrible spots in the world and they had no idea what they were going to encounter. And so these things need to be done up front so that people understand what they're going to encounter. It won't prevent injury, but it'll certainly make people aware. It'll make them seek help at an appropriate time. They'll get the care that they need. And then once it's there, we have research that NANOS research is done for us over the course of our programs. It's over 95% satisfaction. And what the veteran community says is when they come to our programs, they say they feel safe, supported, and understood.
Perfect.
And that's important.
Thank you so much for that. And I do want to get to Mr. Thorne as well, because I want to ask you, what sort of an impact do you think it would have on a veteran who might be suicidal or a family member who's lost a loved one to suicide if they are expecting the opportunity to come to share at this committee but ended up not being invited due to a lack of time. This study is set to be for 6 meetings. Would you sort of suggest that that would have a detrimental impact on someone in those situations, and should this study be longer?
Well, certainly, I think that if somebody is expecting the opportunity to speak, when we see people affected by suicide, and some of my other colleagues have touched on it, it is an enormously destructive and painful experience for somebody to be close to suicide, to be affected by suicide. And so, I would absolutely strongly advocate that if somebody has mustered the courage and taken the time to open up that very painful experience and speak on it, that they absolutely be allowed to, because to have that opportunity and then to have that opportunity taken away, I think would be extremely, extremely painful.
Okay, thank you. Given that, I'd like to move the following motion, that according to the training received by the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs on trauma-informed practices, and with recognition of the immense courage it takes for witnesses to recount their stories related to suicide, that this committee extend the current study on suicide prevention to no less than 10 meetings in order to accommodate all witnesses who wish to give testimony, to ensure that all are heard on this gravely important matter. I've got copies I can distribute. I won't speak to it. I want to see if we can get this dealt with very quickly so we can get back to hearing from the important witnesses. But I just will mention that there are over 60 witnesses here. And as has been said, certainly anyone who has had the courage to step forward and say, I would be willing to come and talk to the committee about my experience with this kind of a matter, whether it be a family member who's lost a loved one, whether it be a veteran who has suicidal thoughts. We really should make sure they're all heard. So I'll just ask that members give this consideration. We can maybe pass this very quickly and get back to our witnesses.
Yes, so Mr. Richards, I would like to suspend this meeting so we can have a few minutes for everyone to decide. I'll ask Mr. Casey for a few words.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I believe that the motion is premature. I believe that the appropriate time to determine whether to extend the study is at the end of the minimum number of meetings that we've set out. I don't think that we can predict how we're going to feel after 6 full meetings, and I don't think it's fair to have that discussion in front of the witnesses who've given their time to be here, and therefore, Madam Chair, I move that debate on this motion now be adjourned.
You can ask, is it a little bit late?
I do believe that we'll put these questions to a vote. So I would like to proceed with the vote.
Briefly,
I
before.
already
before
called the vote, Mr. Richard.
You asked if we could, and I'm saying I think we
No.
could. I'd just like to make the one comment, which is that we know we have 60
A motion
witnesses,
to adjourn
so I don't
debate
know why
is
we
not
couldn't
debate
just make
is
a
not
decision.
itself debatable. If Mr. Richards wishes to engage in debate, that's not permitted. You're obligated to go straight to a vote.
Definitely obligated to go straight to a vote, but we will proceed with the vote. On va procéder au vote.
Point of order.
We will proceed to the vote.
Madam Chair, what is the motion that we are voting on, please?
We're going to be, the motion that Mr. Casey is proposing is that we adjourn on the proposed motion of Mr. Richards, and we proceed with our witnesses since they are here today, and we thank them very much. So I would like a vote. Mr. Clerk, it's our first time, so let's do this together.
It has been moved by Mr. Casey that in relation to the motion of Mr. Richards, debate be now adjourned. Okay. Madame Auguste?
In favor.
Mr. Casey?
In favor?
Mr. Clark?
In favor?
Ms. Hurdle?
In favor.
Mr. Richards?
Opposed, as I thought we could just go straight to a vote and then pass this, but I'm opposed to the adjournment.
Mr. Fraser?
No.
Mr.
No,
my apologies, sir. Mr. Viersen?
No.
Ms. Wagenthal?
Mrs. would be fine with us voting on the actual motion, so I'm not in favor of this. Then we could move on.
Madame Goudreau?
No.
La motion de Mr. Casey.
So the motion of Mr. Casey is defeated. Mr. Casey?
So the debate is now on the main motion? Very well. Thank you, Madam Chair. As I indicated, I strongly feel that the motion that has been presented is premature. It's most unfortunate that there was no discussion among the parties in advance to see this coming. I think there is absolutely nothing to prevent us from bringing this motion forward at the end of the 6 meetings that we've prescribed as the minimum, and that a fulsome discussion could be held at that time. And so, for that reason, I will be voting against the motion. That is not to say that I'm looking to limit debate, but I think it's too early for us to say whether debate should be extended I think we should have the benefit of the 6 meetings that we've set forward before we make this decision. I don't think we have enough information to make it now.
Madame Gaudreau.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, we're terribly sorry, but we will still have time left for you. I would simply like to say that it's true. Why now? I find that a little troublesome as well. It's not necessarily premature, Madam Chair, that we wouldn't need this, but could we still go through a few more meetings before we look at this? Of course, I will vote against it, but that said, during our break week, I will communicate with my witnesses, because if we decide that we may need more meetings, then they could be able to, predict appearing. So perhaps by the 5th meeting, not at the end of the very last 6th meeting, we could bring it up then. So I'm ready to vote. I'm convinced that we will need more meetings, though. So I'd like to hear you on this.
Okay, Madame Gaudreau, je veux juste
Ms. Gaudreau, I would just like to clarify with you. You say that you're ready to vote. Are you calling for the vote? Yes.
But we continue. Okay, parfait, parfait. Mr. Richard?
And I want to make this very brief because I want to get back to the witnesses, and I do apologize to them. I didn't expect there to be any debate. I thought this would be a no-brainer that we would all support this, so my apologies. I just point out, I did raise this last meeting. There didn't seem to be any disagreement amongst any of the members that we would need more meetings, so I thought it was appropriate to move the motion. We do know we have over 60 witnesses who've come forward. We have 4 meetings, I think, left. I think it's fairly clear, Madame Gaudreau just indicated herself that it's fairly evident that we'll need more meetings. So I don't really understand why it's premature. I think it's important. Like in these sorts of situations, people need time to prepare. We've got people who this is going to be very difficult for, and the further ahead that they can prepare, the better. I'm trying to be sensitive to those witnesses. I'm trying to ensure they all have a chance to be heard. I didn't think this would be problematic. I'm apologizing to the witnesses that it's taken this long. I really hope we'll get the extra meetings so that more people like yourselves will have the opportunity to testify. But it seemed to me a no-brainer, and I'll be saddened if it doesn't pass. So we'll leave it at that and go to a vote.
Sorry, Mr. Richard. Mrs. Wangenthal would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have been on this committee since 2016, when the Liberal government came into government. I've been through many, many meetings, and we took the trauma training specifically for this reason. We have witnesses that want to come here. I can tell the member who's new and very passionate about this, they are beside themselves with anxiety and concern with the fact that they don't know for sure, or if they do come, they get 5 minutes. So we went through all of this with trauma training to make sure that our witnesses have the opportunity they need to be able to present here. And the fact that we say, wait till we're done those 6 meetings, in the time between now and the end of those 6 meetings, there is no reason to cause them that kind of grief. There are so many that want to comment here. We had multiple women, and I thank God for that came here for the women's study and shared incredibly difficult things in this room. And we should be offering that same opportunity to these people who are coming, who have had to deal with suicide, either within family members or whomever, and have that opportunity. I do not agree with waiting until the end of these meetings, 6 meetings, to let those other witnesses know whether or not they are actually going to have the opportunity. We've all invited them to come. They want to come. We should be giving them the opportunity to be at this table with us, and they should be able to know that now. That's my perspective.
Madame Gaudreau.
And it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I have further information to share. I don't know who's on the list of witnesses. If there are 60 and we need to hear these people, then I will say yes. If already, as a basic point, absolutely. If there are extra points to be made and elements, then we need to have that.
Mr. Tomey, just exactly how our motion is stipulating, it's a minimum of 6. We've never said that we would stop after 6. Mr. Tomey, you want the floor.
Yeah, I'm asking this committee, what kind of message are we sending to those that are actually struggling with suicide and that are veterans? I'm disappointed that we're actually having this debate, and I apologize to our guests, and I would hope that we take this subject seriously and that we give those that are actually watching this committee, and I'm hoping it'll give them courage to actually come forward, because we do need more meetings. Thank you.
As we're good to present to the vote? Anyone would like to?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Mr. Viersen.
Mr. Viersen? Mr. Viersen?
I think Madam Goudreau asked you a question about how many witnesses were on the list. I thought we discussed this last meeting. I thought it was 55 or 57. But it's higher than that? Okay. 56.
So we have 56 organization and individuals who have been shared as witnesses to this committee. As good practice, there's an allocation between each party. And I think, Madame Gaudreau, we're expecting So, on va vous laisser la permission d'étendre pour nous donner vos témoins.
So we'll give you permission and time to provide us with your witness list. Indeed, there are several witnesses. And as I've always said, I don't think we had said that we would stop at 6. The motion stands at a minimum of 6. I'm not sure if anyone else wishes to speak. Mr. Casey.
I'm a bit troubled that Mr. Richards chose to disclose a conversation that happened in camera, but it seems to me that that is the very objective of this exercise, is to in front of the cameras, try to paint the other side as someone who doesn't want to hear from witnesses. What we know, I guess I find it somewhat surprising that once we get witnesses in front of us for an hour, all of a sudden we have some information that we didn't have when we as a committee made a decision to set a 6-meeting minimum. So here we are. So I stand by my previous comments. What's happening here right now is pretty ugly. It's pretty ugly what is happening in front of the cameras in order to be able to paint the other side as not wanting to hear evidence, when in fact this is it's pure and utter 100% gamesmanship, and we shouldn't stand for it.
Sorry, je suis la liste, Madame Gaudreau. Monsieur Clark.
I'm sorry, I'm following the list, Ms. Gaudreau. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only point I would make is that as members of the committee, I think we should all strive to be reasonable in how we conduct ourselves. And I think if Mr. Richards was willing to have this motion typed up and prepared, I wish it had been shared ahead of time. And we could have had a chance to build consensus and work on it. And I would ask Mr. Richards why that was not done. I think that would be a reasonable thing for us to do, given the circumstances, given what we're talking about. None of us here are sitting here and saying we don't want to let witnesses speak on this really important topic. What I am saying is that if we had a motion, it could have been shared ahead of time. And I wonder why not. That's my only question.
Madame Gaudreau.
Ms. Gaudreau. Yes, Madam Chair. I'm the only one, it seems, here who can testify that, and I'm really sorry about this, but this happens pretty often. I'm not looking for power. I'm not trying to protect my government. I'm not trying to hold power or move into the seat of government. So I'm the only one who can speak from that position. So first, being surprised, having such precious witnesses, that's extraordinary. Second, if indeed we need 10 meetings, Well, then, of course, we'll all say yes. But please, I think the show is like it's done, it's over, and let's now deal with real matters. Otherwise, it's starting to get a little, this is very uncomfortable. It's unhealthy.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gaudreau. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres gens qui voudraient parler ou on peut passer au vote?
Would anyone else like to speak, or can we move to the vote on Mr. Richards' motion? Would you like me to reread the motion, or are we ready to vote on it as is? Very well, then let us hear the vote.
Madame Auguste.
Contre.
Mr. Casey.
Against?
Mr. Clark.
Against.
Ms. Hurdle.
Against.
Mr. Richards.
In favor.
Mr. Tolmie.
For.
Mr. Viersen.
Yes.
Ms. Wagenthal.
Yes, please.
Madame Gaudreau.
Oui. Et voilà. Bon. OK. Oh oui, il faut que je... 5 votes en faveur, contre. Donc, la motion.
5 in favor and 4 against, so it is passed. Thank you. We will return to our witnesses. Once again, we are extremely sorry for having lost this precious time that was set aside for your testimony. That said, let us continue. We are into our second round. 5 minutes. There were...
Richard, and I mean 20 seconds.
Thank you. So I just want to say to our witnesses, I apologize that we lost time with you. I honestly had believed that we would just go to a vote. It was a no-brainer. We would pass it. Luckily, we got the result that was needed, but I apologize it took away from your time because that's unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard. I would like to pass now 5 minutes to Mrs. Ertel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, apologies for the politicizing you just witnessed. So let's refocus. Ms. Blackburn, I'd like to ask you some questions, please. And I'd like to begin by thanking you for your dedication to Canada's veterans and your understanding of the importance of community service. It's clear that this is foundational to the Veterans Association Food Bank. Can you share how you've achieved the successes you've seen in your work? And do you think being based in Alberta has had any unique contribution to that success?
So I think the biggest thing that I see as our success is that it's veterans helping veterans, and that's what we've sort of established from day one. I truly believe that having a physical location where they can gather and talk and understand each other, like everybody on this panel has said, that everybody speaks. Our veterans have a unique way of discussing things amongst each other in a bond that we will never understand. So we started in Calgary, and then we branched out to Edmonton. We have Grand Prairie, Lethbridge now, and then with the VHP program through Infrastructure Canada, we now do Manitoba, Saskatchewan, BC, Western Canada, and it's the same everywhere. And we get phone calls all the time. When are you going to open one of these in our city? So I don't think that just because it's based in Alberta has any more significance. I think this would be so beneficial to have in every city. And like, I know a lot of our veterans and anybody doesn't want to go to a food bank. So we've just now kind of stabilized it as Veterans Association. So we have our emergency funding program, we have the Pet Promise program, we have a thrift store, we have Thursday night dinner. So it's just a whole bunch of things. So if one shoe doesn't fit, then you can try something else. So I think our greatest success mostly is because it's veterans that run most of this. All of our volunteers are veterans, 90% of our workforce is veterans, giving people ownership in something. I think that's what makes us successful.
Could you, so there's demand, you're saying, in other areas, you're hearing it. How would you go about scaling your programs into other provinces or across the country? Any thoughts on that?
So I'll just kind of use Calgary as our model. It's a very generous city when it comes to donations. We do a lot of events, a lot of fundraising events. We have a lot of corporations that now support us. But I think that to have this in every province, we would have to have a lot more government funding. And like I said earlier, when Veterans Affairs calls us saying, can you help this veteran pay their rent? Can you help this veteran, with gift cards for food or whatever? And we get no funding from Veterans Affairs. It just is mind-boggling. And with the Veterans Homeless Program, our biggest fear, we just had a bunch of meetings with them in the last couple of weeks, is that this is only a 4-year program. So how well do we establish ourselves into other provinces and start building those communities for them without having funding at the end? That's my greatest fear.
You mentioned a school strike in Alberta, I think. How is that impacting your ability to provide services?
Well, I think the biggest thing is our kids in the schools are really gung-ho every year to have their food drives for the food bank. We really focus a lot on educating our youth and younger kids. I think that's just sort of gone to the wayside a lot with the education system. So not being able to go into schools and talk to, have the veterans go and have their social teas with them, or having their time to speak to kids about what it is to be a veteran and the support that we need. I think that, everybody rushes out, which is nice, on Remembrance Day to provide food and donations or whatever. But the truth is our veterans served 365 days a year. They need support 365 days a year.
And I gather you have a family who served in the armed forces, and my grandfather served in World War II, and I lived with my grandparents as a child, so I understand how the whole family serves, not just the veteran. In Nova Scotia, where I live, the space of service to veterans is being filled greatly by Vets Canada. And they have a number of programs that they do. I'm about to run out of time, so I'm going to cut my preamble down a bit. So I'm wondering about collaboration. Does your organization collaborate with other groups as far as best practices, and how is that working for you? Is it working for you?
We do, so we're sort of Western Canada, and Vets is sort of Eastern Canada, but we still collaborate with each other if we have a veteran. And if Vets Canada can't get to one in the East, we certainly help, and same as if there's a disconnect with somebody in the West, they help us. So we work with Homes for Heroes. We have referred some people to the Veterans Transition Network. We just kind of do the day-to-day stuff. If you just keep people stable every day, that's what we do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate. Pour 2.5 minutes, Madame Gaudreau.
Rapidement, avant que vous ayez du temps pour répondre à ma question, je pense qu'il serait très utile si vous pouviez nous fournir recherches, données dont vous disposez, que ce soit des corrélations, par exemple, à un traumatisme crânien versus ceux qui ont fait des tentatives de suicide. Ça peut être l'impact de la zoothérapie. Ça peut être, on parlait du 2/3 de plus qui ont des pensées suicidaires si on est ancien combattant. Bref, pour ajouter à notre rapport, on n'a pas besoin de s'en parler. Vous avez...
To add to our report, you need only send it in, and we would like data then, if possible, and related to what you've been telling us. And my question from earlier, what do you think of anyone having a decision to make on Veterans Affairs, of their needing to have at least a context-setting training so they understand what veterans live with and have lived through before they make the decisions and make programming decisions?
I didn't get most of the question, Madam, but I apologize. When it comes to stats, you spoke to, is there an increase in suicidality when you see PTSD, TBI? there isn't concrete statistics, but we know that those folks struggling with mental health problems, and if they're in crisis and they're significant, that will lead to suicidal ideation or suicide attempts. There's another question that came up earlier that I did want to highlight is the importance of housing, the importance of employment, the importance of that sense of purpose. We know that suicide risk is highest in those first 2 years post-service during that transition time. So what can we do as a collective to ensure that they're getting that care upstream so that when they do transition to post-service life, that they have that sense of purpose, they have that sense of community, that belonging, that identity. Because when you lose that, you don't know what to do with your day, you don't know who you are as an individual, and as a result of that, that can lead to that mental health problems and mental health crisis. So we have to move upstream. We have to think about what we can do during transition because, ultimately humans are social creatures. We strive for social connections, and veterans are the same. They have that when they're deployed or when they're together with their, colleagues or others. We need that sense of community. But I don't know, Gabby, if you want to speak to it a bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Firdaus, and thank you for the question. I think it was spoken to quite eloquently in terms of the need for cultural competency training when we talk about gatekeepers, people who are working with veterans. I think when we're talking about within this study, suicide, we also have to be talking about a competency in understanding suicide and how to talk about that. That's a separate expertise, and I think that interdisciplinary approach is necessary when we're looking to support and save many veterans, and especially, as Firdaus said, during that transition period when there is a high risk. So I do think that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is incredible training that is out there, but to have that collaborative approach, cultural competency and suicide prevention training, I think is necessary.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Wagenthal.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mr. Thorne, I'm going to begin with you. I've gone back and looked at some of your testimony in the past, 2019, 2022, and now here today, and I thank you for the work that your very professional organization does and the research and follow-up that you do that makes you very reputable. So just very briefly, I'm going to speak to what you said. In 2022, reading the news that a Veterans Affairs case manager offered medical assistance dying unprompted to a veteran is deeply troubling, and it seems to run counter to the entire purpose of the department. And I think we've all come to that conclusion, and hopefully that ripple will somehow be healed within the veterans community, because we know that word travels and that sense of unrest was very real. So you spoke to your organization. First, we provide mental health services. Suicide is the worst possible outcome for veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Number two, we also know that PTSD is treatable. Our evaluations, and you talk about them, show significant reduction in it, along with depression and suicide. Thirdly, you indicate that due to the military culture, veterans are often reluctant to get that help. And of course, the sooner they can get it, the better. So when they seek help, you stress that our system needs to respond quickly with quality services. And finally, number four, with medical assistance in dying becoming available for mental health disorders. Now, you spoke in 2022, and that was to happen in 2023, but it has been delayed, and more discussions going on about that, thankfully. We must consider the issue of access both for MAID and for veterans services. So we can't have a system that offers veterans medical-assisted death faster than it offers them access to evidence-informed care that they rightly deserve because of their service to Canada. You have a very strong statement here, and I know it's because you know that you can treat PTSD, and you do a wonderful job of assisting them to get past that point of looking for suicide. You, as they're out, you are a registered service provider, correct? To VAC?
Yes, we are. That's right. That's
okay.
Correct.
You were in 2019 as well, but at that time you said, we've seen the rate of approval for veterans eligible drop drastically over the last 3 years. So that was in 2019. So in 2022, did that get better or worse as far as the number getting assistance through VAC? And is everyone who's asking for your help that can qualify for VAC assistance, do they get it?
We have unfortunately not seen that number improve. We still put a number of veterans through our programs who, so far as we can tell, would be eligible for funding from Veterans Affairs through our status as a service provider, but we do not receive that funding because of the complexity and the time delays involved in that approval process. One of the points I made in that testimony is that veterans often only reach out and ask for help when their symptoms, their suffering is becoming quite severe because of the issues like stoicism that we've heard about earlier in today's testimony. Because of that resistance to help seeking, they are a strengths-based culture because of the work that they do. But that means that many often only reach out when they are seriously struggling with symptoms. And so we believe it's very important that they can quickly access those services. For that reason, we do not turn them away if the Veterans Affairs funding will not be approved in time. But the result then is that we have to use charitable donations to pay for those clients, which, again, as far as we can tell, could otherwise be funded by Veterans Affairs.
Applied for it and, oh, sorry?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there at first. But
oh, I'm sorry. So they've applied for funding that it appears they should receive. You say it comes too late. So basically, if they get the support that they need in advance of getting that funding, they no longer qualify to get that funding. Is that correct?
So in order for a client's participation to be funded in our program, they would need to receive pre-authorization before the program begins.
Okay, yeah.
Typically speaking, they're reaching out in a short period of time before we are able to get them on a program. And the message we often hear is that there is not enough time for the case managers to complete that process in order to basically greenlight that funding.
So you talked a bit about the statistics that we've received on the number of suicides up until 2017 and expressed a concern for the future. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, please? Do I have time?
You have 15 seconds, sir.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So the most recent study we have was published in 2021, but only covers suicide data up until 2016, at least the most recent study that I could find. So we are approaching possibly a 10-year period for which we do not have statistics on veteran suicide.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Wagenthal. Thank you. Madame Auguste, pour 5 minutes.
Ms. Auguste, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Tung, I would like to thank you and your team for supporting veterans and offering safe places to veterans. It's also quite clear that the partners who support you each bring something different to the table to this very important conversation that you have underway with veterans. Could you try to define the expectations of the partners when they approach you and tell us how you help these partners better understand veterans and the challenges that veterans live as they move into civilian life?
Question. I apologize. My strength is not, my French is not strong enough to respond in French, so I will respond in English. The expectations that we try and set with partners. So we have many partners that we work with, organizations that provide funding to us, organizations who provide cross referrals, other forms of support, organizations that we refer to, like those that are also here today, my fellow witnesses. The expectations that we begin to set, I think they have been discussed quite well in this committee already about the importance of specialized and culturally competent care. Veterans have an incredibly unique experience in military training, in military service, and in the experiences that can create operational stress injuries like post-traumatic stress and moral injury. Those injuries and those experiences are often not well misunderstood by service providers who work in the civilian realm. So bridging that gap between the experience of the veteran and the understanding of the service provider is crucial to providing quality care. And as it's been talked about earlier, nobody understands the experience of a soldier better than another soldier. This is the core of why our program was developed in the late 1990s as a group program at the University of British Columbia, because our founders understood that there was so often a gap in the services that veterans could receive, that gap of understanding. So we pair trained, licensed, registered psychologists and mental health professionals with returning program graduates, veterans who have been through our program, who have lived the experience for themselves, and they work hand in hand to ensure that the work we do is culturally competent, it's informed, and that we can speak the language and connect with their experience. Beyond that cultural competency, The group format also allows people to rebuild connection, to rebuild a sense of purpose, meaning, belonging, all of which are preventative factors for suicide. That is one of the most challenging pieces that we communicate to our partners, is the importance of specialized services. And it's the point that I want to underscore in my testimony here today.
Merci beaucoup. Et parmi la liste de...
Thank you very much. And among your partners, Boeing is an important employer, but also a group that could really make use of your competency, and veterans as well, and what veterans learned in service and the sort of skills they can bring to their new jobs. So if other industry leaders would like to work with you, helping veterans in their transitions to civil life, what special advantages would, let's say, Boeing be able to offer to that, or you offer to Boeing and future partners?
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. We've worked with Boeing for many years. They've generously supported our programs across Canada, and we're extremely grateful to them. And also, they were a major partner in the Invictus Games as well in Vancouver earlier this year. And in terms of what we can offer, like our colleagues at Wounded Warriors Canada and at Atlas, we too are working on a cultural competency offering specifically for those working in the employment, HR, and mental health realms. I actually think it's later on this week that I have a meeting with some of our friends at Atlas to discuss collaboration. We've also connected with Dr. Tim Black at Wounded Warriors Canada, so we do all work closely together. What we believe we can offer is certainly an understanding which will help better translate veteran culture and veteran skill sets into the civilian workplace. I think what an organization like Boeing has to offer is a history and a practice of hiring veterans. We see that with many other organizations in Canada as well. When veterans have a place that they can land within either their educational or their work institutions where they can find people with shared experience, we see a much greater likelihood of transition success and stable employment, which are, once again, key factors to veteran well-being and to preventing suicide.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Auguste.
Thank you very much, Ms. Auguste.
I would like now, just in concept of time, we'll do 4, 2.5, 4, and 4. So Mr. Tomey for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you so much to our witnesses and your testimonies. In our last meeting, one of the things that we acknowledged was that there's a blind spot, and how serving members, when they're in the military, they've got their comrades, and the term was, we've got your six. When they leave the military, they don't have that support system. And one of the things that was brought up in the testimonies today was, understanding the culture and understanding the language. Captain Philip, or Captain Ralph, let me ask you, do you believe that VAC should employ more serving members as case managers?
That's an interesting question.
That's what I always ask the interesting questions.
Yeah, I don't think that whether or not a person is a serving member is, I know in our experience at Wounded Warriors Canada, maybe I'll put it that way, we know that the veterans and the public service members that contact us immediately get a lot more comfortable when they find out that the Director of Clinical Services is a veteran, that our two health services coordinators are the spouse of a veteran and a service veteran, and then our director of training is a still serving member of the Canadian Armed Forces. So that certainly has been a positive thing in our experience. And then, Oliver mentioned, the use of lived experience peers on programming, et cetera. That's also been a positive thing. It's a thing that we both employ in our programs and the model, because we have some shared history there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, Madam, is that a yes? Yeah. Yes or no?
I think it depends on the individual, quite frankly. I don't think just because a person is a veteran, they're necessarily going to be a good case manager.
No, that's a fair point. I saw some other heads nodding when I asked this, but one of the things that I'm concerned about is that you can, through body language, understand maybe someone that's suffering from depression and maybe have suicidal thoughts. And we get that training when we were in the military. And so I'm interested from the Atlas Institute, what your comments are. How do you reach people that don't want to come forward, that they're embarrassed and shy? I mean, this is a difficult thing that they've got to face and to confess or share with someone. What are your thoughts?
40 seconds.
Thank you.
I'll take half, and I'll ask Gabby to speak to rural and remote veterans, because I think that's an important element to what MP is asking there. But if you're not hiring veterans, I think you have to have that cultural competency training for case managers at the minimum. That needs to be set in stone, that all case managers have some sort of sense of the veteran that they're speaking to and understand that culture, so that they can connect with them and then they can actually offer them that supports and services. So at least at minimum, I think that cultural competency training is crucial. But I think rural remote veterans is also something that we don't hear much about them, and they're the ones that are usually forgotten. So I don't know, Gabby, if you want to speak to that quickly.
Yeah, sure. I'll be quite brief. So what we do know is that veterans reside in rural and remote areas more than the general population, and their distance to services is quite stark. And so one of the ways in the kind of recommendations that was put forward when we did a roundtable with these individuals was to support peer support. We see that, again, veterans helping veterans is critical, to support the infrastructure of virtual support through the coverage of internet, to have cultural competency when it comes to veteran space, but also Indigenous spaces, because we have a lot of Indigenous veterans that live up in remote and rural locations. And then to include competency within families as well. So not forgetting that families deserve services within their own rights as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Dupuis. We will now have Mr. Casey for our 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be directing my questions to the witnesses from Atlas. But just picking up where you left off, your comment, Ms. Dupuis, on Indigenous veterans, that's one of the groups that will have their the examination of their issues pushed back further as a result of the motion today. And if you really want to know what the motion was all about, just follow the social media accounts arising from this meeting. To the subject at hand, Ms. Dupuis, you wrote an article or did a study 10 years ago entitled, "Do Facebook Suicide Memorial Pages Adhere to the World Health Organization's Do's and Don'ts of Social Media Suicide Coverage?" I'd be interested to hear more about that. And I realize that it's 10 years old, but we have heard consistent testimony here that the rates of suicide among veterans have not moved in the last 10 years. So I'm hoping and expecting that it's still relevant.
Certainly. Thank you for your question. So yes, that study was done 10 years ago, and it looked at Facebook suicide memorial pages in North America in general. But I would note that the sample size of veteran memorial pages was too small to do a sub-analysis. But at large, what I saw was that they did not adhere to guidelines, and that in a sense it can create risk, and it can create risk of contagion. Although I think it's important to note, typically people who are making these memorial pages are very well-intentioned people, but perhaps are not educated in the risks associated with publications. I think what is also important, though, is that Atlas 4 years ago worked with a researcher at McGill who did a study specifically on Canadian media publications specific to veterans and veteran suicide and mental health coverage, also looking at an analysis of do they adhere to current guidelines. And again, the findings were quite similar in that they largely did not. And some of those guidelines would be things like don't mention the method of use, where the suicide happened, to ensure that there are helplines ensure that we're also talking about stories of resilience, not putting it on the front page. These are all guidelines that when they did the study, essentially most publications were not following those, which is why we worked with journalists and veterans to create guidelines that are specific to the coverage of veterans, and we distributed those across journalism schools altogether. But I think Madame Goudreau made a good point, is that there has been a kind of a national shift in pride of our military services, because a lot of that has to do with the media publications. One, the general public doesn't tend to know what our military is doing, where are they operating, what are they doing? And then two, when we do see it in the media, it's often stories that are quite negative and violent, and don't actually represent what our military and veterans, Canadian military and veterans actually look like.
Thank you for referring to that study. I was actually going to come back to it because you did raise it from the outset, the work that you've done with McGill. On the subject of bringing in more witnesses, the person with whom you collaborated at McGill, can you give us his name, his or her name?
Certainly,
because perhaps
it's Dr. Robert Whitley.
They could do one of the.
Dr. Robert Whitley. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that research publicly available?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. You also mentioned some research research collaboration with Queen's University. Is that CIMVHR?
The CIMBR, yeah, that is part of the CIMBR forum. The researcher, CIMBR, the researcher that we work with is a member of CIMBR. Oh, sorry.
Si maybe hold that thought. I apologize. No problem. Je suis vraiment désolée. Madame Gaudreau pour 2.5.
I'm very sorry, Ms. Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure, because my question was very specific earlier, and I was told that I'm not sure if everyone had turned on the English translation, so let me say it again, but please don't start my time. So, research carried out McGill internally on various therapies or correlations between a specific type of trauma. Do people need, for example, more support because they have attempted suicide more often? All such data, I know you have data, I would like us to be able to append it to our report. So I'm sorry for the repetition, but I'm not sure, based on the answers I received, that you had that question clearly. So my question now about the community and the outreach and use of your services in general. I'm an MP in the Bloc Québécois Party, so I'd like to know, for people now listening to me, what your services are within the province of Quebec, and also for people who speak solely French. Can you say yes, no problem? In Quebec, we're offering the same types of services as elsewhere and in both official languages.
I would love to answer your question because we have worked hard at Wounded Warriors Canada to ensure that all our programs are available in both official languages. We've had slow uptake for people requesting programs in French. We have a number of qualified clinicians that are ready to run programs. So I'll say, in general, every single one of the programs listed on our webpage is available in both official languages, with the exception of our Warrior Kids program, but we're working on that. And once we get that, once we have clinicians trained that French is their first language, that one will be available as well. But every single program, from our surviving family to our trauma resiliency program to our couples program, they're all available in French and English. And our online offerings are now being offered in both languages as well.
Même chose pour vous.
Yeah, we're also a national organization, so of course all of our resources are available in both official languages. We work with partners in Quebec like Le Sentier, who we should also invite to this committee, Le Sentier. But we're also holding a roundtable with Francophone veterans. It's part of our mandate is to bring that community together because their needs might be unique. We don't want to assume what is happening with one population also applies to another population. So we are hosting a Francophone veteran roundtable where we're going to gather that data and information. But to your earlier question, I think there are some gold standard treatments that work, like prolonged exposure, like cognitive processing therapy, like there's some elements of peer support that show to be quite beneficial. So, of course, I think, when it comes to access, we need to be promoting that more widely to say that these services are available, but some folks might not have access, which is
Madame
the issue.
Gaudreau, j'ai été très généreuse.
Ms. Gaudreau, I've been most generous. I'm very sorry to cut you off. I think this will be the last round. We have a few extra minutes, so I will give Ms. Wagenthal 3 minutes, and we will wind up with 3 minutes on the Liberal side.
All right. Thank you so much for the extra time. I appreciated what you were saying, Mr. Ruff, about the training, even for global affairs before they go overseas and whatnot, trauma-informed. So that's for their benefit, I take it, in the circumstances they're going to be in, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
The latest round of deployments, after the October 7th attacks, we trained the entire staff that went to Israel.
So my question is, and I don't know, I would open it up to anyone who wants to answer, what do we do for trauma training for those that are going to be deployed within our armed forces? Is there anything that can be done? I appreciate the challenge in that. I know they have to train to go and do what they need to do. But when they come home, too, do we reach out specifically, or should we be creating policies that say we will reach out specifically to those who end up deployed into combat zones? Because I keep hearing we don't know where they are. We don't know because, there's privacy, all these issues. Do you agree with that, or should we be doing more proactively?
As much as you've heard that on the regular force side, 40% of everybody who deployed to Afghanistan was a reservist, and nobody knows where they are. And that's something that's really
very important
to me, because I was a reservist and very proud of that service. But also, I think that we need to really talk about prevention. There are organizations now, such as York Regional Police, Toronto Police, putting officers before they even get into the car. They have to take the Wounded Warriors Canada Before Operational Stress program so that they understand what they are going to be exposed to, what to look for, when to ask for help. We've trained organizations such as the Ranger Patrol Group in BC on our trauma resiliency training so that they can go out into the communities they go into.
At a very little time. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
However, could Mr. Thorne respond? You're dealing with veterans who come back. Do you see opportunities to be more preventative in advance of them deploying, or at least responding immediately when they come back? Just very briefly, I thank you, Chair.
Yes, absolutely. I think we obviously still see that the effects of deployment and military service are causing operational stress injuries. That is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. We know that people are going to be exposed to those risks when they do this job. And so greater enhanced training, enhanced opportunities to learn about the effects of operational stress, how to recognize them, how to mitigate them, will be very worthwhile investments. We see some work being done in the transition group within the Canadian Armed Forces, the Road to Mental Readiness program. We advocate as much as possible for more and more experiential programming, people, not PowerPoints. It is that connection, it is that experiential and personal component of this type of work, which is so crucial to treating the effects of operational stress injuries and the risks of suicide.
Last 3 minutes, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to say thank you to all the witnesses. I think it's been really informative and eye-opening and helpful for us, so thank you for that. Captain Ralph, I wanted to touch on something I asked witnesses last week at committee, which is how do you, on an issue like this, how do you track the effectiveness of your program? So we talked about this, as I said last week, if a veteran doesn't commit suicide, which of course is the goal, it's hard to track something that didn't happen. So how do you assess your program's effectiveness in helping veterans deal with the issues that they may be dealing with? How do you track it?
Yeah, well, every graduative program is given an anonymous survey that is administered third party by Nanos Research that tracks whether or not they found the program helpful, et cetera. I will say, especially, and I would assume that the data would correlate from the public safety to the veteran space as well. But I would say that we've noticed that when people take programs at the right time, they're no longer going off. They're returning to work. They're staying at work because, as been mentioned here, the work they want to do, it's purpose. I mean, it's I remember the first time I put on my uniform. That was like, okay, this is important. This is something. This is something to be proud to be part of. So that purpose thing is really important, and so that's another little piece there. So do we have specific data on suicide reduction? No. But do we see an improvement in the lives and carrying on and reintegrating into society from people who do take our programs? Absolutely.
And over the course of an average year, how many veterans would be coming through your programs?
All programs, I'd say probably about 600.
600, okay. And just to go back quickly to the Warrior Health model, which you talked about quite positively in the first round we had there, what would be required to expand that model across the country? I guess right now it's available. My understanding is only in Ontario.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a little secret. You can access it from anywhere because nobody can track it. But in order for that model to be sustained in long term, and I think that's what it needs to be. I mean, other levels of government coming on board and funding a model that already is proven, already works, and has already been set up is a no-brainer. It's pretty straightforward. It's easy to do. We're in the excuse my language, the get shit done business. That's what we're in.
Yeah, that's a great.
My wife tells me, well, we're not in the army. We're in the church now. Don't speak that way.
Thank you.
I will not comment. I will definitely not comment as this, but I would like to say a big thank you to all of our witnesses. And again, we apologize for the small delay. Your testimony, your candor, and certainly your experience has been, I'm sure, extremely valuable by all our members here. Donc, I will say thank you. Thank you for what you do to our veterans community. And again, Captain Ralph, thank you for your service. And I know how proud, and I can sense that, although that little language, I'm not sure our interpret were able to translate this, but to all of you, thanks again. Well, we started very well. So I'm only on my 5th committee meeting, and this is the language. So, okay. So thank you very much. Écoutez, notre prochaine réunion aura lieu le.
Our next meeting will take place on Thursday, the 9th of October, and as had been decided from the outset, we will continue with our study on suicide prevention among veterans.
We had talked about submitting a list for an upcoming next study after we complete this study, but I would just maybe extend now, based on the new motion that we've adopted, that the witness list should come possibly, if that's agreeable for all of you, Friday, October 31st. So we'll move it by 1 week. We'll see how things are proceeding in that sense. So the barrier to entrepreneurship among veterans by Friday, October 31st, 2025, and the witness list can be sent to the clerk. Le comité souhaite-t-il ajourner cette rencontre?
Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Thank you very much. Committee adjourned.